Imagine this. You're walking into your high school cafeteria at exactly 12:15 p.m.
Right in the middle of the rush.
Exactly. It is absolute chaos. I mean, it is packed. It is deafeningly loud. And, that smell of slightly overcooked pepperoni pizza is just hanging heavy in the air.
Oh, I know that exact smell.
Right? So you are just trying to navigate through this, like, sea of backpacks to find your friends. You spot them at your usual table in the back corner. And from 30 feet away, before you can even hear a single syllable of what they're saying over the noise of, 300 other kids, you just stop dead in your tracks.
You realize something's wrong.
Yes, instantly, and with just absolute unbreakable certainty that they are in the middle of a really tense, bitter argument.
It's a profound, it's an almost miraculous moment of human perception when you really break it down.
It is, because you didn't hear a word. You didn't pull out a notebook and consciously analyze their posture or measure the angle of their eyebrows or, calculate the distance between their chairs.
No, there's no time for that.
Right. But somehow, in the time it took you to take a single step, your brain ingested this massive amount of incredibly subtle social data, crunched the numbers, and delivered this final, undeniable verdict. Danger. Do not approach.
Yeah.
How on earth does the human mind perform that kind of calculation so fast?
It feels like magic, right? Or maybe some kind of psychic intuition.
It totally does.
But it is actually the result of a highly sophisticated, deeply ingrained biological mechanism. A mechanism that has been quietly running the vast majority of your life since the day you were born.
And that biological mechanism is exactly what our mission is today. So welcome to the deep dive. Today is going to be a comprehensive shortcut to understanding the very machinery of your own mind.
It's a fascinating topic.
We are unpacking the groundbreaking, Nobel Prize-winning research of psychologist Daniel Kahneman to understand two distinct, completely fictitious characters that are living inside your head right now, steering your reality.
And we're going to call them System 1 and System 2.
Exactly. And by the time we finish this exploration, you are going to understand the underlying mechanics of your own behavior. You will understand why you make those incredibly frustrating, impulsive mistakes on math tests, even when you absolutely know the material.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right. You will understand the biological reasons why you sometimes trust the completely wrong people based on nothing but a gut feeling. And perhaps most importantly, you will see how the true magic of expert intuition, that rare feeling of just knowing the right answer without having to think about it, is actually just a cognitive superpower that you can systematically train.
It really is something you can train.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the idea that there are two entirely different, systems running my brain sounds a bit like a science fiction movie.
It does sound a bit sci-fi.
Yeah. You're telling me that to understand my choices, from what I eat for breakfast to how I take an AP exam, I need to understand this dual system architecture.
I am. But before we get into the granular details of how these systems operate, we really have to establish a foundational baseline.
Okay.
Our goal today is to rigorously separate the biological facts of cognition from the compelling illusions our brains constantly create for us.
Illusions.
Yeah, illusions. Because we all experience our minds as a single, unified entity.
Right.
You feel like one cohesive you.
Let me sure. I'm just me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have a thought, you make a decision, you act. It feels completely seamless. But Kahneman's decades of research reveal that underneath that smooth, unified experience, there's a constant, invisible, and sometimes highly conflicted interplay between two totally distinct modes of thinking.
Okay, so let's pull back the curtain and meet this cast of characters. Let's start with System 1. Who exactly is this character operating in my head?
So System 1 is your fast, automatic, highly emotional, and completely effortless mode of thought.
Effortless.
Entirely effortless. It is the ultimate autopilot. It operates continuously, entirely under the radar of your conscious awareness. So when you walked into that noisy cafeteria and instantly sensed the social tension at your friend's table, that was System 1 doing exactly what it was evolutionarily designed to do.
Just reading the room?
Yes. It constantly scans the environment, it reads microexpressions, it processes spatial relationships, and predicts immediate future actions, all without ever asking for your conscious permission to do so.
I see. So it's essentially a massive reflex engine. It doesn't ponder things. It just reacts based on the data it receives.
That is a highly accurate way to look at it. System 1 handles our most fundamental, innate survival skills. Like, if you are walking down a trail and you see a coiled, snake-like shape in the grass.
Oh, I'm jumping back immediately.
Right. You jump backward before you even consciously register what you were looking at. That is System 1 protecting you.
That makes sense.
But it goes far beyond primal survival. It also handles learned associations that have become automatic through massive amounts of repetition.
Like what?
Well, if I ask you right now, what is the capital of France? Exactly. You didn't have to consciously search your memory banks for that. You didn't have to reason your way to the answer.
No, it just sort of popped up.
The word Paris simply appears in your consciousness. That automatic retrieval is pure System 1.
Oh, or like reading the text on a billboard as I drive past it on the highway. Like, I physically cannot look at a giant sign that says SDOP and choose not to read the word.
You really can't.
My brain just processes the shapes into letters and the letters into meaning completely automatically. I literally can't turn that off.
You cannot turn System 1 off. And that is a crucial design feature of the human brain. It is always running in the background. It is continuously generating impressions, intuitions, and feelings about the world around you. It is just a relentless meaning-making machine.
I want to make sure I really grasp the mechanics of this predictive element you mentioned. So, let's say I'm walking down the hallway and I see a woman staring right at me. Her face is flushed red, her teeth are bared, her eyes are wide and focused entirely on me.
Okay, a very intense situation.
Right. My System 1 doesn't just act like a camera recording the image, right? It instantly recognizes the emotion anchor. But you're saying it goes further and actually predicts the immediate future.
Exactly. System 1 bridges the gap between perception and expectation. It doesn't just register the red face and the bared teeth as isolated data points.
It builds a story.
Yes. It seamlessly integrates them into a coherent narrative. It tells you this person is furious, and she is likely about to start shouting or acting aggressively.
Wow.
You didn't consciously decide to analyze the geometry of her facial muscles. The realization of her anger and the anticipation of her next move simply happened to you as a passive experience.
It just happens to you. That paints a very clear picture of System 1. Fast, effortless, automatic, predictive.
So let's bring in the co-star. Introduce me to System 2.
The co-star indeed. Though if you asked System 2, it would fiercely argue that it is the lead actor, the director, and the executive producer of your life.
Oh, it's got an ego. A huge one. System 2 is the slow, deliberate, highly logical, and analytical part of your mind. It is the voice in your head that reasons through complex problems.
Okay.
But here is the fundamental catch, the biological toll. Operating System 2 requires immense effort, focus, and attention.
Let's ground that in a concrete scenario. When specifically am I forcing System 2 to take the wheel?
I want you to mentally engage with this problem right now. Multiply 17 by 24 in your head.
Oh, wow. Okay. The moment you said those numbers, the entire landscape of my brain just shifted gears.
You felt it, right?
I literally felt a physical change in my posture. I kind of tensed up.
Let's analyze the mechanics of what just occurred in that shift. When I said the word 17 times 24, your System 1 immediately recognized it as a multiplication problem.
Right. That was automatic.
That was automatic. Your System 1 also probably generated a vague intuitive boundary for the answer. It knew the answer wasn't going to be 15, and it knew it wasn't going to be 10,000.
Yeah, I knew it was somewhere in the hundreds.
But to get the actual precise mathematical solution, an answer did not just magically materialize in your conscious mind like Paris did for the capital of France.
Not even close. Instead of an answer popping up, I immediately felt a very distinct sense of mental strain. It was like I had to clear a workspace in my head just to hold the numbers.
That physical sensation of tension and strain is biologically real. To solve 17 times 24, your System 2 has to actively retrieve a specific cognitive program from your long-term memory. You know, the rules of multi-digit multiplication that you were taught in elementary school.
The old carry the one method.
Exactly. Then you have to deliberately implement that program step by step. You multiply 7 by 4, you hold the resulting 28 in your working memory, you carry the 2, you multiply 1 by 4, you add the 2.
It's exhausting just talking about it.
It is a highly laborious sequential process. It requires you to constantly keep track of where you are in the sequence, what numbers you are holding, and what the next step is.
And working memory feels incredibly fragile. Like if I'm right in the middle of multiplying the tens column, holding these numbers in my head, and a friend walks up and simply asks me, hey, what do you want for lunch?
It's gone.
I lose my place entirely. The mental whiteboard gets wiped clean, and I have to start the entire calculation over from scratch.
That fragility is a defining characteristic of System 2. It requires sustained, intensely focused attention to function. The mental work is deliberate, effortful, and orderly. It is the absolute polar opposite of the fluid, reflexive, associative nature of System 1.
What's fascinating here is that describing it this way really makes me feel like I have two distinctly different personalities taking turns running my body, depending on the task.
It's a great way to visualize it.
But I want to clarify something. You mentioned earlier that these are fictitious characters. These aren't literal physical hemispheres of the brain, right? Like, it's not like the left hemisphere is System 1 and the frontal lobe is System 2.
That is a vital distinction to make. Daniel Kahneman is exceptionally clear that System 1 and System 2 do not exist as distinct anatomical biological structures.
Okay, good to know.
You cannot point to a specific quadrant on a functional MRI scan and declare right there that glowing red spot that is System 1. They are, in his words, useful fictions.
Useful fictions. That implies we are basically telling ourselves a fable to understand our own neurobiology. Why do we need the fable? Why not just describe the actual neural pathways?
Because our brains are fundamentally wired to process information much more effectively when it is framed as a narrative about active agents with distinct traits, goals, and personalities.
We like stories.
We love stories. It is vastly easier and frankly more useful for our daily lives to say System 2 calculates math products than to try and describe the mind-bogglingly complex cascade of electrical impulses and neurotransmitter releases across multiple disparate brain networks that collectively handle working memory, visual processing, and executive function.
Yeah, that's a mouthful.
The fiction allows us to map our behavior in a practical way.
That makes perfect sense. It's like I have two roommates living inside my head. System 1 is the roommate who just blurts out the absolute first thing that comes to their mind without any filter or forethought whatsoever.
Oh, we all know that roommate.
They are highly emotional, they jump to wild conclusions based on thin evidence, and they thrive on immediate reactions.
Exactly.
And System 2 is the roommate who drafts a text message, deletes it, edits it, runs it through a mental grammar checker, agonizes over how a specific emoji might be misinterpreted by the recipient, and takes 20 solid minutes of pacing before finally hitting send.
That is an exceptionally perceptive analogy. And the complex, ongoing dynamic between those two roommates dictates the entire trajectory of your life.
Wow.
But here is the central twist of Kahneman's work. Because we consciously experience the deliberate, effortful thinking of System 2, because we can actually hear the internal monologue of weighing pros and cons, we naturally tend to identify with it.
Right. That feels like me.
Exactly. When you think of you think of your System 2. You view yourself as the conscious, reasoning self that holds distinct beliefs, makes careful choices, and decides what actions to take. System 2 firmly believes it is the protagonist of your life.
But Kahneman is suggesting it's not the protagonist.
It is not. The secret, silent author of the vast majority of your daily choices, your judgments, and your actions is actually the automatic, unfiltered System 1.
The blurted out roommate.
Yes. System 1 is constantly, effortlessly originating impressions and feelings about everything you encounter. If System 2 endorses those impressions, which it usually does without much scrutiny, those fleeting impressions crystallize into your explicit, deeply held beliefs and your voluntary choices.
So to carry the analogy forward, System 1 is constantly pitching ideas and strategies, and System 2 is just sitting at the executive desk, rubber stamping the paperwork and taking all the credit for the decisions.
Most of the time, yes. When everything is going smoothly and there are no obvious threats or logical paradoxes, System 2 adopts the intuitive suggestions of System 1 with little or no modification.
Yeah.
You generally believe what System 1 tells you to believe, and you like what System 1 tells you to like.
I have to push back on this architecture, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because if System 2 is the smart, logical, analytical one, the one that can do complex algebra, evaluate complex moral arguments, and foresee long-term consequences, why don't we just use it all the time?
It's a fair question.
If I am a high school student navigating an incredibly complex social hierarchy or studying for the SATs, why wouldn't I just keep my impulsive System 1 locked in a closet, let System 2 drive 100% of the time, and make perfect, rational decisions all day long?
It is a perfectly logical question to ask, but it collides head-on with a fundamental, inescapable limitation of human biology.
Which is?
We simply cannot use System 2 all the time because it operates on a severely restricted, highly limited energy budget.
When you say budget, are you talking about an attention budget?
Yeah.
Like a limit to how much we can focus?
Precisely. System 2 has a hard-capped capacity for attention. When you engage System 2 in a highly demanding cognitive task, what Kahneman refers to as a mental sprint, it consumes so much of your available attention that you become, for all practical purposes,
Yeah.
completely blind to other stimuli in your environment.
Wait, blind. You mean figuratively blind, like ignoring a text message while studying it right?
I mean, effectively, functionally blind to massive visual events occurring right in front of your open eyes.
Seriously.
Yes. This is a well-documented psychological phenomenon known as inattentional blindness. Have you ever encountered the famous invisible gorilla experiment?
I think I have. Is this the video clip with the college kids passing basketballs in a hallway?
That is the one. Psychologists Christopher Chabris and Daniel Simons created a brilliant, deceptively simple short film. It shows two teams of people passing basketballs back and forth. One team is wearing bright white shirts, and the other team is wearing dark black shirts. Before watching the video, the viewers are given a very specific, highly demanding instruction.
What's the instruction?
They have to count the exact number of passes made by the players in the white shirts and entirely ignore the players in the black shirts.
Let's look at the mechanics of that task. That instruction forces System 2 to be highly engaged.
Oh, absolutely.
You have to lock your visual focus on the white shirts, actively suppress the visual interference of the black shirts moving around, and simultaneously hold a running mathematical tally in your working memory. That takes real effort.
It requires sustained, unyielding attention. So the viewers are intensely focused, tracking the white shirts, counting the passes. About halfway through this short video, a woman wearing a full head-to-toe gorilla suit walks right into the middle of the basketball court, stops, thumps her chest while facing the camera, and then slowly walks off screen.
And the gorilla is on screen for how long?
The gorilla is fully visible for 9 solid seconds.
And people just don't see it.
Roughly half of the thousands of people who have watched this video while performing the counting task do not notice the gorilla at all.
Wait, so they completely missed a person in a full gorilla suit? Like, a person just walked through the middle of the screen?
Right through the middle, pounded their chest and everything.
And people just didn't see it because they were counting basketballs? That is genuinely hard to wrap my head around. A human-sized gorilla walking through a small group of people.
What is even more fascinating than the blindness itself is the subject's profound disbelief when they are told about it afterward.
Oh, I bet.
When they are shown the video a second time without the counting task, they are utterly shocked. They initially insist that the video must have been edited because they are completely certain that there was no gorilla the first time.
They think it's a trick.
Exactly. They simply cannot believe their own brains could miss such a striking, bizarre, and obvious event right in front of their eyes. It beautifully illustrates two terrifying facts about human cognition. We can be completely blind to the obvious, and we are simultaneously blind to our own blindness.
Because their System 2 attention budget was entirely maxed out by the cognitive strain of counting the passes and filtering the shirts, there was literally zero computational power left over for their visual cortex to process the anomaly of the gorilla.
Exactly. When you are engaged in a mental sprint, you have zero spare capacity. Your brain triages its resources, and anything not relevant to the immediate System 2 task is simply dropped from consciousness.
Wow.
And Kahneman himself studied this capacity limit extensively, not just looking at visual attention, but looking at the actual measurable physical toll of mental effort.
Let's pause and really look at that mechanism. You were saying there is a physical toll. Engaging System 2 actually changes your body's physiology.
Dramatically so. Mental effort is not just an abstract philosophical concept. It is a grueling physiological reality. In Kahneman's lab, they devised an incredibly demanding cognitive task to measure this.
What was the task?
They had participants listen to a string of 4 random digits played to the steady, unyielding beat of a metronome. Let's say the digits were 5, 2, 9, 4.
Okay, 5, 2, 9, 4.
Immediately after hearing them, the participant had to repeat a new string of digits. But they had to add 1 to each of the original digits. So 5294 becomes 6305.
Okay, I'm doing that in my head right now. It requires some focus. I have to hold the numbers and do the addition, but I feel like I could manage that.
Now imagine the next level of the experiment, a task called add 3. You hear the numbers 5294. To the strict beat of the metronome, without pausing, you have to instantly calculate and speak the numbers 8, 5, 2, 7.
Oh, absolutely not. That sounds like a nightmare. I would panic trying to keep up with the metronome.
It is designed to push the human brain to its absolute maximum computational limit. And what makes this study incredible is that Kahneman wasn't just measuring how many answers they got right. He had a highly sensitive camera focused directly on the participant's eyes.
Why the eyes?
He utilized the fact that the pupil of the eye is a real-time, highly accurate physical indicator of mental effort. As the participants engaged in the grueling Add 3 task, their pupils dilated, massively increasing by up to 50% of their original resting area.
50%, that's huge. The pupil dilation proves the brain is working harder. It's like looking at the electricity meter spinning on the side of a house when you turn on all the appliances.
That is the exact analogy Kahneman uses. The pupil is an electricity meter for cognitive exertion. And the physical changes didn't stop at the eyes. The participants' heart rates reliably increased by about 7 beats per minute.
Just from thinking.
Just from thinking. Their muscles tensed up, their blood pressure shifted, and perhaps most importantly for understanding our limits, their brains were literally consuming significantly more glucose, more physical blood sugar to power the neural networks in the prefrontal cortex handling the calculations.
So intense, deliberate thinking actually burns physical, biological energy. The battery metaphor isn't just a metaphor.
It is a biological reality.
Yeah.
And because it burns so much precious energy, System 2 is fundamentally designed by evolution to be lazy.
Lazy.
Kahneman identifies this as the law of least effort. If there are several different ways to achieve the same goal, your brain will always, inevitably, gravitate to the course of action that demands the least amount of mental energy. The System 2 absolutely does not want to work hard unless it is strictly forced to.
It's like a teenager trying to find the absolute minimum amount of work required to technically complete their household chores without getting grounded.
That is a perfect description of the law of least effort. And this biological drive to conserve energy leads to a highly consequential and sometimes dangerous phenomenon known as ego depletion.
Ego depletion, what's that?
A researcher named Roy Baumeister pioneered this concept, discovering that all variants of voluntary effort, whether it is cognitive strain, emotional regulation, or physical stamina, all draw down from the exact same shared pool of finite mental energy.
Wait, I really want to make sure I understand the scope of that. Are you saying that forcing myself to sit still and focus on a complex calculus equation and resisting the urge to check my phone notifications and forcing myself to be polite to a classmate who is actively annoying me,
Yeah,
all of those totally different activities drain the exact same biological battery?
precisely. If you have to force yourself to do something, if you have to exert conscious top-down control over your natural impulses, you are draining that shared pool of energy.
So it's all connected.
Yes. And once that pool is drained, you're going to be significantly less willing or simply less able to exert self-control when the very next challenge arises. You are in a state of ego depletion.
Okay, we need to bring this out of the laboratory and into the real world. How does this shared battery of ego depletion actually impact high-stakes decisions?
One of the most famous and frankly unsettling real-world studies on ego depletion looked at the daily decisions of 8 parole judges in Israel.
Parole judges, that's a huge responsibility.
Exactly. These are highly experienced, respected judges who spend their entire workdays reviewing complex applications for parole. They review dozens of cases a day, spending an average of only 6 minutes on each case.
6 minutes? That's not a lot of time to decide someone's future.
It's not. Now, the easiest, safest default decision, the one that requires the absolute least amount of mental justification and risk assessment, is to simply deny the parole request and keep the prisoner incarcerated.
Because it maintains the status quo.
Right. Granting parole requires taking on risk. It requires writing a complex legal justification, and it requires overcoming the baseline default. It requires intense System 2 effort.
So this is a job that demands constant, high-stakes System 2 engagement for 8 hours straight.
Exactly. The researchers meticulously tracked the judges' decisions across thousands of cases, mapping them against the time of day. Crucially, they also noted exactly when the judges took their scheduled food breaks, a mid-morning snack break, and a lunch break.
And what did the data reveal about their decisions?
The pattern was staggering. Right after a meal, when the judges are physically rested and their blood glucose levels have been restored by the food, they grant parole in roughly 65% of the cases they hear.
Okay, 65%. That seems fairly high.
But as the morning wears on, during the 2 hours leading up to the next break, the judges become increasingly tired, hungry, and deeply ego depleted. As that battery drains, the approval rate drops steadily downward.
How far does it actually drop? Does it go down to 40%? 30%?
Just before a meal, when the judges are at their most depleted, the approval rate drops to almost zero.
Wait, really? 0?
Literally almost zero.
That is profoundly disturbing. You are telling me the difference between a prisoner gaining their freedom or staying locked in a cell depends on whether the judge had a sandwich recently.
It is a stark illustration of human biology overriding professional expertise. When the judges are severely depleted, their system 2 simply lacks the necessary energy to carefully and thoroughly evaluate the complex, nuanced risks of granting parole.
It's just too tired.
The brain cannot afford the cognitive strain, so predictably they fall back on the law of least effort. They automatically take the easiest default option suggested by System 1, deny the request. Minimize the immediate risk. Keep them in prison.
It's unsettling to realize how much our biology dictates our most supposedly rational choices. And here's where this gets incredibly relevant for anyone listening to this deep dive, especially a high school student. Think about the architecture of your average day. You wake up early, you sit through 6 solid hours of classes, constantly trying to force your brain to focus on chemistry formulas, historical dates, foreign language syntax. You are constantly, relentlessly draining that System 2 battery.
It's marathon.
Right. Are you saying that if I come home and spend 3 hours doing intense AP calculus homework, I am biologically predisposed to snap at my younger siblings, or completely abandon my chores, or make a really dumb, impulsive social decision later that night simply because my System 2 is depleted?
Yes. That is the exact biological mechanism at play. If we connect this to the bigger picture of your daily life, willpower is not a fixed moral personality trait.
It's not just about being a good or disciplined person.
No, it is a biological battery that gets depleted through use. When System 2 is exhausted from translating Spanish or cramming for a biology test, it physically loosens its inhibitory grip on your behavior. System 1 takes the wheel.
And we know what System 1 is like.
It is emotional, it is impulsive, and it heavily favors immediate gratification over long-term goals. Studies consistently show that people who are cognitively busy or ego-depleted are far more likely to make poor dietary choices like choosing chocolate cake over fruit.
Oh, totally guilty of that.
They are more likely to make selfish financial choices, and they are prone to using superficial, aggressive judgments in social conflicts.
That is simultaneously terrifying, but also incredibly validating. It explains so much about why late-night arguments escalate so quickly, or why I can't seem to make disciplined choices when I'm physically and mentally exhausted. My filter is literally powered down.
It is one of the most critical insights into human nature you can possess. Because System 2 is so easily exhausted, so biologically expensive to run, and fundamentally lazy by design, it has no choice but to leave System 1 on autopilot for the vast majority of our waking hours.
Okay, so if System 2 is basically asleep at the wheel most of the day because it's too tired to engage, that means my impulsive, emotional, corner-cutting System 1 is driving the bus of my life.
Essentially, yes.
If that's true, how does System 1 actually navigate the incredibly complex modern world? How does it make these split-second decisions without crashing the bus?
System 1 navigates the chaos of the world by operating as a massive, hyper-efficient, associative machine.
An associative machine, meaning its primary function is to connect things together.
Exactly. It connects ideas, memories, visual cues, emotions, and even physical bodily reactions in a vast, dense, interconnected web of meaning.
Okay, I'm trying to visualize that.
To truly understand how powerful and completely automatic this associative network is, I want to conduct a quick demonstration. I want you to simply listen to these 2 words. Don't analyze them. Just pay attention to what spontaneously happens in your body and your mind when you hear them. Ready?
Ready, let's do it.
Bananas. Vomit.
Oh, wow. Okay, my stomach literally just did a little flip. I immediately pictured this mushy, brown, spotted yellow stuff, and yeah, no thank you. I genuinely feel a little bit of physical disgust right now. My throat feels a bit tight.
Let's carefully examine what just happened in that half second. In less time than it takes to blink, an entire cascade of complex events occurred completely beyond your conscious control.
I couldn't stop it if I tried.
You automatically experience unpleasant, vivid visual images. Your face likely twisted into a subtle micro-expression of disgust, wrinkling your nose. Your heart rate might have bumped up slightly. Your stomach reacted.
And all of that from just 2 random words spoken out loud.
Because your System 1 is an associative machine, it instantly assumed a temporal and causal connection between those 2 arbitrary words.
It made a link.
It constructed a sketchy, rapid-fire scenario in which the bananas were the direct cause of the sickness. And as a direct physiological result of that mental link, if I were to offer you a fresh, perfectly ripe banana right now, you would almost certainly decline. You were experiencing a temporary, biologically induced aversion.
But that's what's so crazy about it. There was no story there. You didn't tell me a narrative about eating a bad banana. You just said the 2 words next to each other. Bananas, vomit.
System 1 does not require a logical, fleshed-out narrative. It creates its own reality out of whatever fragments are available. Your mind automatically linked the words to make sense of their proximity, and that mental link triggered a genuine physical reaction to protect you from perceived poison.
That is wild.
This is the very essence of associative activation. One idea triggers a second idea, which triggers a memory, which triggers an emotion, which triggers a facial expression, which then physically reinforces the emotion you're feeling. It is a massive, self-reinforcing ripple effect through your nervous system.
Wait, if my brain automatically connects abstract concepts and generates physical reactions without my permission, isn't that a massive vulnerability? Can that associative machinery be hijacked or used against me?
It absolutely can be hijacked, and it happens to all of us constantly through a psychological phenomenon called priming.
Priming.
Yes. Priming occurs when exposure to one seemingly irrelevant idea or stimulus unconsciously influences your subsequent behavior, emotions, or thoughts.
I need to understand the mechanics of this. How exactly does a word or an image prime my physical behavior?
We can look at one of the most famous, albeit controversial studies in the field, known as the Florida effect. It was conducted by psychologist John Bargh. He brought a group of healthy college students, 18 to 22-year-olds, into a laboratory at New York University. Their assigned task was to assemble 4-word sentences out of a scrambled set of 5 words presented on a screen.
That sounds like a remarkably standard, somewhat boring cognitive psychology task.
It was designed to look incredibly boring.
Yeah.
But here's the trick. For half of the students, the scrambled sentences secretly contained words heavily associated with the stereotype of the elderly.
Like what kind of words?
Words like Florida, forgetful, bald, gray, or wrinkle. Crucially, the actual word old was never explicitly used in the puzzle.
So the researchers are subtly, subconsciously activating the concept of old age in the students' associative networks without them realizing it.
Exactly. They're priming the concept. After the students completed the scrambled sentence task, they were told the experiment was over and were casually directed to walk down the hallway to another office to get their paperwork.
Oh, okay. Standard procedure.
But that short, unassuming walk down the hallway was the actual experiment. Researchers were secretly stationed with stopwatches, timing exactly how long it took each student to walk from one end of the corridor to the other.
Are you implying that reading words like Florida and gray actually changed the physical speed at which a healthy 20-year-old walks?
Yes. The data showed that the young people who had been primed with the elderly words walked significantly, measurably more slowly down the hallway than the control group who unscrambled neutral words.
No way. That's crazy.
The abstract idea of old age had primed the physically motor behavior of walking slowly. And when the researchers questioned the students afterward, none of them realized the words had a unifying theme, and they vehemently denied that the words could have possibly influenced their walking speed.
It's deeply unsettling to realize how little jurisdiction my conscious mind actually has over my body in that hallway. Their System 1 read the semantic words, activated an entire associative network relating to the concept of the elderly, and then sent a signal to their motor cortex to physically slow down their limbs, all while their conscious sister 2 had absolutely no idea it was happening.
It is a profound blow to the ego of System 2 to realize it is not completely in control of the ship. But the evidence for the power of priming is everywhere once you know what to look for. Consider the money prime.
The money prime.
In several different experiments, researchers simply introduced a subtle background reminder of money into the environment, like a screensaver showing floating dollar bills on a computer, or a stack of Monopoly money casually left on a nearby desk.
Let me guess, based on the associative network of money, does seeing cash make people greedy?
It primes a very specific, complex set of behaviors centered around individualism. Money-primed people become significantly more independent. For example, they will persevere almost twice as long on trying to solve a difficult puzzle before finally asking the experimenter for help.
They want to rely on themselves.
They do. But the dark side is that they also become noticeably more selfish and less social. They are measurably less likely to help a clumsy stranger who drops a handful of pencils on the floor.
Just because they saw Monopoly money.
Yes. And one fascinating variation, if they're asked to set up 2 chairs for a getting-to-know-you conversation with another person, the money-primed individuals place the chairs significantly further apart than non-primed people do.
They physically distance themselves from other human beings just because they saw a screensaver of dollar bills. That is staggering.
The abstract concept of money primes individualism. It activates a network that makes people reluctant to be involved with others, to depend on others, or to accept demands from others. And again, all of this complex social behavior is authored entirely beneath the threshold of conscious awareness.
I want to apply this to the daily life of the listener. If these subtle environmental cues can drastically alter our behavior, what does that mean for the spaces we live in?
That's a great question.
If I have a specific poster hanging in my bedroom, or a carefully curated lock screen on my phone that I look at 80 times a day, is that image subtly priming me to behave a certain way every single day without me knowing it?
It is highly probable. Our environment is constantly, relentlessly feeding associative cues to System 1.
Ah,
Kahneman shares a brilliant real-world story about an office kitchen at a British university that perfectly illustrates this.
what happened in the kitchen?
For years, this office had maintained an honesty box where staff members were supposed to drop in a few coins to pay for the tea and coffee they consumed from the communal supply. There was a simple list of suggested prices pinned to the wall above the box.
In my experience, high school club honesty boxes never work that well. People always seem to forget to bring cash when nobody is actively watching them.
Human nature is remarkably consistent. Well, the researchers decided to run a subtle long-term experiment in this kitchen. Without giving any warning or explanation to the staff, they placed a small banner poster on the wall just above the price list.
Okay.
For 10 weeks, they alternated the image displayed on this poster every single week. One week, the poster featured a beautiful, calming picture of flowers. The next week, the poster was replaced with an image of a pair of human eyes, staring intently and directly at the observer.
Oh, that's incredibly creepy. You go to make your morning tea, and there are just disembodied eyes staring at you right above the coin slot.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a subtle but unmissable cue, and the behavioral results were spectacular. The researchers tracked the amount of coffee consumed versus the money deposited. During the weeks when the intensely staring eyes were displayed, the office staff contributed almost 3 times as much money to the honesty box as they did during the alternating weeks when the flowers were displayed.
3 times the revenue. Because their System 1 subconsciously registered the eyes, activated the feeling of being watched, and triggered a fear of social judgment.
Precisely. A purely symbolic, completely static photograph of eyes printed on a piece of paper prodded highly educated adults into massively improving their moral, cooperative behavior. And just like the students walking down the hallway, the staff had absolutely no conscious awareness that the posters were dictating their level of honesty.
This brings up such a profound philosophical point about how we experience our own lives. We walk around believing we are making these conscious, rational, moral decisions. You know, I'll pay for my coffee today because it's the right and ethical thing to do. But in reality, our System 1 is just automatically reacting to environmental cues like a printed pair of eyes and manipulating our behavior before System 2 even gets out of bed.
It completely upends our traditional view of rationality. It connects directly to a psychological concept called embodied cognition. The core idea is that we do not just think with our brains in isolation, we think with our entire bodies, and our bodies are constantly reacting to the physical environment.
Do we have proof of that?
We do. To prove this, researchers conducted an experiment where people were asked to hold a pencil in their mouths. Half the group was instructed to hold the pencil horizontally between their teeth, which physically forces the facial muscles into a shape resembling a smile.
Like this.
Yes, exactly like that. The other half was told to hold the pencil by pursing their lips around the eraser end, which physically forces the face into a shape resembling a frown.
Okay, so you are artificially forcing a physical expression onto their face using a prop.
Right. Then, while holding the pencils, the participants were asked to view a series of Gary Larson's The Far Side comic strips and rate exactly how funny they found them. The data revealed that the people whose faces were forced into an artificial smile rated the cartoons as significantly funnier than the people whose faces were forced into a frown.
That is wild. So the mere physical act of engaging your smile muscles actually changes your cognitive evaluation of humor. It makes you find things funnier even if the smile is totally fake.
Yes. The physical action primes the corresponding emotion. We think that being amused makes us smile, and it does. But the associative network has reciprocal links. Smiling also physically makes you feel amused. Frowning makes you evaluate images as more disturbing.
That's a two-way street.
A completely two-way street. System 1 is constantly updating its internal model of what is normal based on these dense looping associations between your body and your environment. It is a machine designed to quickly jump to coherent conclusions. And it's governed by a foundational rule that Kahneman calls WYSIAD, what you see is all there is.
What you see is all there is. W-Y-S-I-O-T. Let me parse that. Are you saying that System 1 only cares about the tiny sliver of information it has immediately available in front of it, and it flat out refuses to pause and ask, wait a minute, am I missing any crucial facts or context before I make this judgment?
It never pauses to ask that question. System 1 is not designed for thoroughness. It is designed for speed. It excels at constructing the best, most coherent possible story that incorporates whatever ideas or emotions happen to be currently activated in your associative network.
But it doesn't fact check.
It biologically cannot allow for information it does not possess. The measure of success for System 1 is the internal coherence of the story it manages to create, regardless of how complete or accurate the underlying data actually is.
I need an example of WISIOT in action. How does my brain jump to a conclusion while ignoring missing facts?
Let's test your System 1 right now with a classic example known as the Moses illusion. I'm going to ask you a simple question. How many animals of each kind did Moses take into the ark?
Okay, let's see. Two. He took two of each kind, right? Male and female.
And your System 1 just fell perfectly into the trap.
Wait, what did I miss? Did he take 7 of some kinds?
Moses didn't take any animals into the ark. Noah did.
Oh my gosh, you are entirely right. How did I completely miss the wrong name being the subject of the sentence?
Do not feel bad. A huge majority of people miss it. But let's look at the mechanics of why you missed it. It is pure WYSIOT. The phrase animals going into the ark instantly sets up a strong biblical context in your associative network.
Right.
The name Moses is a very normal, highly associated figure within that biblical context. He does not stick out as abnormal or surprising in that sentence. Furthermore, Moses and Noah share similar vowel sounds and syllable counts.
Ah, I see.
Your System 1 unconsciously detected this associative coherence. The words felt like they belonged together, and it rapidly created a fluent, easy story. Because the story felt coherent, your brain accepted the premise of the question without ever triggering the alarm bells necessary to wake up your critical System 2 to check the facts. What you saw was all there was.
My brain just paved right over a massive factual error simply because the overall vibe of the sentence felt correct. The context hijacked the facts.
Exactly. System 1 is incredibly fast at jumping to conclusions based on whatever fits the current associative context. But this raises a really critical systemic problem. What happens when this automatic conclusion-jumping machine is faced with a difficult question that it genuinely doesn't have the answer to?
Like if I'm faced with a complex probability problem on a math test, or a really nuanced moral judgment about a friend's behavior, does System 1 just throw its hands up, admit defeat, and hand the steering wheel over to the smarter System 2?
In an ideal world, yes. But remember the law of least effort. System 2 is profoundly lazy and biologically expensive to run. It does not want the steering wheel. So, to avoid waking up System 2, System 1 employs a very clever, highly deceptive cognitive trick. It uses a process called substitution.
Substitution, like a bait and switch, swapping one thing out for another.
Precisely a bait and switch. When your brain is faced with a difficult, cognitively demanding target question, System 1 automatically seamlessly substitutes it with an easier, related heuristic question, and then it proceeds to answer the easier question instead.
And I don't even notice.
You do it so smoothly and so quickly that you almost never notice the swap occurred. You genuinely believe you answered the hard question.
Okay, I really need to see the mechanics of the substitution in action. How does my brain secretly swap out questions without me noticing?
Let's try what is perhaps the most famous cognitive puzzle in the world. I want you to answer this as quickly as possible. Don't overthink it, just let your intuition deliver the first answer that comes to mind.
Okay, hitting me with a math puzzle. My System 1 is ready.
A bat and a ball together cost a total of $1.10. The bat costs exactly $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost?
Well, the total is $1.10. The bat is $1 more, so the ball is 10 cents.
And right there, we see the power of substitution. The number 10 cents instantly, effortlessly came to your mind. It feels incredibly intuitive, it feels mathematically appealing, and it is entirely demonstrably wrong.
Wait, how is 10 cents wrong? Let me force my System 2 to actually look at this, okay? If the ball is 10 cents and the bat is $1 more than the ball, then the bat would be $1.10, which makes the total cost $1.20. I see the trap. To make the math work, the ball has to be 5 cents. Then the bat is $1.05, making the total $1.10. Wow. I completely instantly fell for it.
You are in very good company.
Yeah.
Kahneman and his colleagues gave this exact puzzle to university students. Over 50% of students at elite institutions like Harvard, MIT, and Princeton gave that exact same incorrect, intuitive 10-cent answer.
Harvard students got that wrong.
Yes. At less selective universities, the failure rate jumps to over 80%.
But why is it so magnetically easy to get that wrong? Once you point it out, it's incredibly basic middle school algebra.
Because we need to look at what System 1 actually did. The original target question, formulating and solving the algebraic equation of x plus 1 equals 1.10, is slightly difficult. It requires holding variables in working memory. It requires cognitive strain. System 1 hates cognitive strain.
Right.
So your System 1 instantly, subconsciously substituted the algebra problem with a much easier visual and conceptual parsing question. How do you naturally separate the number $1.10 into a whole dollar and the leftover cents?
Oh, that makes so much sense.
The answer 10 cents neatly and cleanly popped into your head. It felt aesthetically correct, and your lazy System 2 simply rubber-stamped the answer without bothering to spend 3 seconds checking the math.
That is deeply humbling. My conscious mind, my System 2, just accepted the easy wrong answer simply because the physical effort of checking the math felt slightly too burdensome.
It happens to all of us, every single day. And it happens in scenarios with stakes infinitely higher than a bat and ball puzzle. Kahneman recounts a deeply revealing conversation he had with the chief investment officer of a massive global financial firm.
Oh boy, high finance.
This executive had recently made the decision to invest tens of millions of dollars of his clients' money into Ford Motor Company stock. Kahneman asked him to explain the analytical process behind that massive decision.
I would assume a guy in that position pulled out a massive multi-tab spreadsheet analyzing the future of the global auto industry, evaluating supply chain logistics, calculating price-to-earnings ratios, that kind of deep quantitative analysis.
You would assume that, but you would be wrong.
Hmm.
The executive proudly replied that he had recently attended a major automobile show and had been incredibly impressed by the design and feel of the new cars.
Wait, what?
He literally said to Kahneman, "Boy, do they know how to make a car." He made it explicitly clear that he trusted his gut feeling on the showroom floor and was very satisfied with his multi-million-dollar investment decision.
Wait, he risked tens of millions of dollars in the stock market based purely on the vibe that they make a cool car.
Yes. Let's look at the substitution that occurred. As an investor, he was faced with an incredibly difficult, highly complex target choice. Question, is the current price of Ford stock undervalued by the global market, making it a good investment?
That's a hard question.
That question requires immense, grueling System 2 analysis and predictive modeling. His brain recoiled from that effort. So his System 1 automatically substituted a vastly easier emotional heuristic question. Do I personally like Ford cars?
And he liked the cars.
The answer to that heuristic question was a resounding yes. He felt a positive emotional glow about the cars, and he allowed that feeling to dictate a massive financial investment.
That is genuinely frightening when you think about how much of the world is run by people making gut decisions like that.
It is a textbook example of what psychologist Paul Slovic calls the effect heuristic. When we are evaluating something complex, we often bypass logic entirely and just consult our raw emotions.
So we just go with how we feel.
We substitute the difficult question, what do I think about this policy or investment, with the much easier question, how do I feel about it? If we have a positive emotional reaction to something, our System 1 automatically assumes its benefits must be high and its risks must be low without ever checking the data.
I want to apply this to the listener's life because this has massive implications for school. What does this substitution process mean for a high school student sitting in a classroom taking a multiple choice test in, say, AP US history?
It's highly relevant.
Let's say you are looking at 4 possible answers to a complex historical question. You read option C, and the phrasing of that answer uses words you've seen in the textbook before. It feels highly familiar. If you pick C just because the phrasing sounds familiar, you aren't actually answering the target question, is this statement historically accurate? You've substituted it. You are answering the heuristic question, have I seen these words before?
That is a brilliant, highly practical application of the theory. What you are describing is a specific vulnerability known as the illusion of truth, which is heavily driven by a state Kahneman calls cognitive ease.
Cognitive ease. We touched on the idea of strain earlier with the math problems. Cognitive ease is the opposite. It's when System 1 feels comfortable and unchallenged.
Exactly. Imagine a dashboard in your brain with a single dial. On one end of the dial is cognitive ease, and on the other end is cognitive strain. When the information coming in is extremely easy to process, perhaps it is printed in a bold, incredibly clear font. Or perhaps you are in a great mood, or perhaps the phrase has simply been repeated to you many times, the dial swings firmly into cognitive ease.
And what happens when the dial is on ease?
When System 1 is experiencing ease, it generally concludes that the current situation is familiar, it is safe, and crucially, it assumes the information is true.
So the biological sensation of familiarity literally feels identical to the sensation of truth to our brains.
Yes, a highly reliable, scientifically proven way to make people believe a total falsehood is simply frequent repetition, because the human brain struggles to distinguish the feeling of familiarity from the feeling of factual truth.
That explains a lot of internet rumors.
It certainly does. If you read a completely fabricated statement printed in high-quality, high-contrast black ink on white paper, you are statistically far more likely to believe it is a true fact than if you read the exact same statement printed in a blurry, washed-out, difficult-to-read font.
Just because the high contrast ink is physically easier for my eyes to process, it requires less visual strain.
Yes, because easy-to-read font generates a state of cognitive ease, and cognitive ease actively suppresses doubt. It lulls System 2 to sleep. But here is the fascinating, practical inverse of that dynamic. Let's return to the bat and ball puzzle where everyone failed.
I am never going to forget the embarrassment of the bat and ball puzzle.
Researchers took the cognitive reflection test, a short test, which includes the bat and ball puzzle, and gave it to a large group of Princeton students. Half the students received the test printed in a normal, highly legible, standard font. As expected, roughly 90% of those elite students made at least one careless mistake on the test, relying on their flawed System 1 intuition.
Right, because the clear font created cognitive ease, so their lazy System 2 didn't bother to wake up and check the math.
But the researchers gave the other half of the students the exact same test, but they purposely printed it in a tiny, washed-out, barely legible, light gray font. The puzzles were physically very hard to read. You had to squint and focus just to make out the words.
Logic would dictate that they must have performed worse, right? If the questions are harder to read, it adds a layer of difficulty to the test.
You would think so. But actually, the proportion of students making intuitive errors plummeted from 90% all the way down to 35%.
Wait, I need to make sure I heard that right. The terrible blurry font made them perform vastly better on the math.
Yes, because the barely legible font forced the students' brains to experience physical cognitive strain. The visual processing was difficult. That biological sensation of strain sent a loud alarm signal through the brain, effectively jolting System 2 awake.
It woke up the analytical roommate.
Exactly. The brain shifted from a casual, easy, intuitive mode into a vigilant, highly analytic mode. System 2 stepped in, took over the cognitive processing, checked the underlying algebra, rejected the intuitive 10-cent answer, and successfully found the correct 5-cent answer.
That is an unbelievable life hack for studying. If you are reviewing material for a massive final exam and your notes are beautifully highlighted and perfectly formatted, reading them creates cognitive ease. You skim them, they feel familiar, and your brain says, yep, we know this, even if you don't actually understand the underlying concepts.
It's a false sense of security.
But if you purposefully make the studying slightly difficult, like forcing yourself to write out the answers from memory on a blank page instead of reading them, that cognitive strain forces your brain to actually engage. It breaks the illusion of competence.
Precisely. Deliberately introducing cognitive strain forces System 2 to actively supervise the learning process. Without that strain, System 1 rules your world through cognitive ease, and that unmonitored ease leads to a whole host of compounding biases, such as the halo effect.
We briefly mentioned the halo effect. Let's dive into the mechanics of that. That's the bias where your initial impression of one specific trait bleeds over and infects your judgment of everything else about a person or a thing, right?
Yes. It is the overwhelming tendency to like or dislike everything about a person, including traits you have absolutely zero evidence for based entirely on your first impression of them.
Give me an example.
Well, if you strongly agree with the politician's views on the economy, the Haley effect dictates that you will probably also unconsciously rate them as having a more pleasant voice, being more physically attractive, and being more trustworthy than they actually are.
It's a package deal.
It is a biological shortcut. It is a way for System 1 to make the complex, messy world feel simpler and more internally consistent than it really is.
Let's apply the halo effect to an AP English teacher grading a massive stack of 40 essays at 10 p.m. on a Sunday.
A very depleted teacher.
Exactly. If that teacher reads the very first paragraph of an essay and it is brilliantly written, it has a stellar vocabulary, a razor-sharp thesis statement, perfect grammar, their System 1 instantly forms a positive, glowing impression of that student. Does the halo effect mean that teacher is going to actually grade the rest of the essay differently than they would otherwise?
Absolutely, and this has been proven in grading experiments. The Teacher System 1 has rapidly constructed a coherent associative story. This is a highly intelligent, capable student,
So the rest of the essay gets a free pass.
basically. So when the teacher flips to page 3 and encounters a paragraph that is vague, poorly argued, or logically weak, their System 1 actively suppresses doubt in order to maintain that coherent, smart student story. The teacher will unconsciously give the student the benefit of the doubt, perhaps interpreting the vague argument as highly nuanced or profound.
And the reverse must be true as well, right?
Yes. Conversely, if the first paragraph of an essay is riddled with sloppy typos, the negative halo effect sets in. The teacher's brain assumes the student is lazy or unintelligent, and they will grade the rest of the essay much more harshly, interpreting every minor ambiguity as further proof of stupidity.
It's incredible to think about how much of our academic and professional success hinges on these invisible cognitive shortcuts. Our brains are constantly substituting easier questions, being manipulated by the legibility of a font, falling prey to the halo effect, and letting our raw emotions dictate our logic.
It's a lot to process.
It is, but this brings me to a massive contradiction that I need you to resolve.
Okay, let's hear it.
If our brains are biologically wired to constantly trick us with these lazy, error-prone heuristics, how do we explain the existence of true expertise? Because we all know professionals, paramedics, professional athletes, master musicians who make split-second instinctual decisions that turn out to be brilliantly, flawlessly correct.
That's a very important point.
They aren't relying on slow System 2 analysis in the middle of a basketball game or a medical emergency. Are they just getting lucky with their heuristic guesses?
That is the perfect pivot point for our discussion. Because while we have spent a great deal of time focusing on the systemic errors, the laziness, and the biases of System 1, it is absolutely crucial to understand that System 1 is also capable of profound, life-saving marvels.
Okay, good. It's not all bad news.
To understand how, we need to sharply contrast the flawed emotional affect heuristic of that Ford CEO buying stock with the rigorous, highly accurate phenomenon of true expert intuition.
Okay, let's explore that contrast. What does true, valid, expert intuition actually look like in the real world?
The renowned psychologist Gary Klein, who specializes in studying decision-making in high-stakes environments, tells a deeply compelling story about a team of firefighters. They responded to a routine call and entered a house where the kitchen was on fire.
Standard operation.
Right. They stood in the kitchen and began hosing down the flames, executing their standard procedure. But suddenly, without any conscious reasoning, the commander of the unit heard himself scream to his men, "Let's get out of here."
Wait, why?
He didn't know why he was shouting it. His gut simply overwhelmed him with a massive sense of impending doom. He ordered an immediate evacuation.
Did they get out?
They dropped their hoses and ran. And almost immediately after the last man bolted out the kitchen door, the entire floor they had just been standing on violently collapsed.
Whoa.
That is terrifying. Did the commander consciously know the structural integrity of the floor was failing?
He did not consciously. It was only after the fact, when he sat down in a quiet room to rigorously analyze his own decision-making process, that the commander realized what his System 1 had actually detected in that kitchen.
What did it detect?
He realized two crucial anomalies. The fire in the kitchen had been unusually quiet, lacking the roaring sound of a typical blaze, and his own ears had felt unusually hot, despite the flames being relatively small. Hot ears and a quiet fire. What does that physical combination actually mean in the context of a house fire?
In the physics of firefighting, it meant that the heart of the fire wasn't in the kitchen at all. The main blaze was actually raging in the basement directly beneath where the firefighters were standing, cooking the floor from underneath.
Oh my God.
His conscious System 2 had no idea the basement was on fire, but his System 1, forged by decades of experiencing thousands of real fires, subconsciously registered those highly specific, subtle cues, the temperature differential, the auditory anomaly, and instantly pattern matched them to a scenario of extreme, imminent danger.
And it just bypassed all logic and yelled run.
It entirely bypassed his slow analytical System 2 and directly triggered an urgent fight-or-flight evacuation order.
That truly sounds like a literal superpower. A sixth sense that saved their lives.
It strikes us as magical, almost supernatural. But the great cognitive psychologist Herbert Simon, who spent his career studying the minds of grandmaster chess players, argued convincingly that there is absolutely no magic involved whatsoever.
So what is it?
Chess masters possess a similar superpower. They can walk past a complex street chess game, barely glance at the arrangement of the pieces on the board, and instantly announce white mates in 3 moves without even breaking their stride or pausing to calculate.
I play a little chess, and I could stare at a board for 45 minutes, draining my system too, and still not see a mate in 3. How do their brains process that geometry in a single glance?
Simon provides what is arguably the most elegant, demystifying definition of intuition ever articulated. He stated, "The situation has provided a cue. This cue has given the expert access to information stored in memory, and the information provides the answer."
So it's just memory.
Yes, he concludes, intuition is nothing more and nothing less than recognition.
Let me repeat that to make sure it sinks in. Intuition is nothing more and nothing less than recognition.
Exactly. It is not magic. It is advanced biology. It is the direct result of thousands upon thousands of hours of prolonged, deliberate practice storing highly valid specific cues in your long-term memory.
Okay, I think I see where you're going.
Yes, think about a 2-year-old child walking down the street, pointing at a golden retriever, and joyfully shouting, "Doggy!" We don't consider that to be a magical act of psychic intuition, do we?
Oh, of course not.
We are completely accustomed to the everyday miracle of a child's brain, learning to recognize and name categories of things based on visual patterns.
Right, the toddler's System 1 has simply learned the visual pattern of a dog. It recognizes the 4 legs, the fur, the tail, the proportions.
A chess grandmaster seeing a brilliant winning move in a fraction of a second, or a seasoned fire commander subconsciously sensing a basement fire from the heat on his ears, relies on the exact same fundamental biological mechanism as the toddler recognizing the dog.
It's all pattern recognition.
It is purely pattern recognition. The experts simply possess a vastly more specialized, incredibly complex vocabulary of patterns stored deep in their System 1 memory banks.
Okay, this brings me to the ultimate million-dollar question for the listener. Whether you are a student taking a high-stakes standardized test, a teenager driving a car on a busy highway, or an athlete playing in a championship game, how do you know which system is talking to you?
That is the big question.
How do you know if your strong gut feeling is true, valid expert intuition, like the life-saving fire commander, or if it is just a lazy, biased, highly flawed heuristic error, like the Ford CEO buying stock just because he thought the cars looked cool?
It is arguably the most vital distinction you can learn to make in your life. Kahneman argues that true expertise, valid, trustworthy intuition, can only develop if 2 very specific non-negotiable conditions are met in your environment.
And those conditions are?
First, the environment you are operating in must be regular enough to be highly predictable. And second, you must have had the opportunity to learn these environmental regularities through prolonged practice and rapid, high-quality feedback.
Let's break those 2 conditions down because they seem crucial. The first condition, the environment must be regular and predictable. What does that mean in practice?
Let's use chess as the perfect example. The underlying rules of chess absolutely never change. The board is always exactly 64 squares. The knights always move in an L shape no matter what. It is a highly regular, strictly bounded, mathematically closed environment.
So it's perfectly stable.
Because the rules are completely predictable, a player can study it for years and their brain can learn the valid repeating patterns. Similarly, while a house fire is chaotic and dangerous, fire itself behaves according to the strict, unyielding laws of physics, thermodynamics, and chemistry. It is a regular environment governed by physical rules.
So because fire always follows the laws of physics, the fire commander's brain could reliably learn the consistent patterns of heat transfer and sound dynamics over time.
Exactly. The patterns are real and stable. But now contrast that with the Ford CEO trying to intuitively predict the stock market.
Oh, right. The stock market is chaos.
The global stock market is not a regular, predictable environment. It is wildly volatile, infinitely complex, and influenced by millions of irrational human decisions, geopolitical events, and random chance.
There are no set rules.
You physically cannot master the stock market through simple visual or emotional pattern recognition, because the patterns you think you see are largely random illusions.
You can't learn the hidden rules of a system that is fundamentally driven by randomness and lacks strict rules.
Precisely. If the environment you're making a decision in is fundamentally unpredictable, like long-term economic forecasting or political punditry, your strong gut feeling is almost certainly an illusion. It is a heuristic substitution masquerading as expertise.
That makes perfect sense. And what about the second condition?
The opportunity to learn through prolonged practice and rapid feedback. This is about how System 1 actually gets programmed. If you make a terrible move in a game of chess, your opponent captures your queen immediately.
The feedback is instant.
The feedback is instant, clear, and painful. Your System 1 learns in that exact moment, that specific visual pattern led to a terrible outcome. Do not do that again. Over thousands of hours of repetitive practice, your System 1 builds a massive, highly accurate library of valid cues.
This totally maps onto the experience of playing a sport or learning a musical instrument. Think about when you first learned to dribble a basketball.
It's tough.
It is agonizing. You have to stare directly at the ball. You are heavily using System 2, consciously thinking about the angle of your wrist, how hard to push the ball down, where it will bounce. It is clunky, slow, and mentally exhausting.
Yes, very draining.
But after 1,000 hours of repetitive practice on the driveway, you don't even look at the ball anymore. You are sprinting down the court, scanning the defense for open teammates while the ball bounces perfectly. The complex mechanics of dribbling have been entirely outsourced to System 1. You have physically built expert intuition through repetition and the immediate physical feedback of the ball bouncing off your foot when you mess up.
That is a flawless illustration of the transition from System 2 to System 1. So, the ultimate takeaway for the listener is this. If you want to know whether you should trust your intuition in a given moment, ask yourself a rigorous question. Have I spent hundreds of hours deliberately practicing this specific skill in a highly predictable environment where I received immediate clear feedback on my mistakes?
That's a great test.
If the honest answer is yes, like playing a guitar chord you've practiced for years, or solving an algebraic equation you've drilled for months, trust your gut. Let System 1 fly. But if the answer is no, like trying to predict the outcome of a complex relationship, or picking a risky career path, or making a major financial purchase, do not blindly trust your gut.
Don't just go with the vibe.
Acknowledge that your gut feeling might just be the affect heuristic. Force yourself to engage the cognitive strain of System 2 and do the hard analytical work.
This has been an absolutely incredible perspective-shifting journey through the mechanics of the human mind. Let's pull all of these threads together to sum up our deep dive today.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. So you are walking around every day operating with two minds. System 1 is your fast, associative, highly emotional autopilot. It governs your day-to-day reality, it effortlessly reads the room, and it constantly jumps to coherent conclusions based on whatever information is easiest and most fluent to process.
Right.
It is an incredibly powerful pattern recognition machine that keeps you alive, but it is heavily biased by WYSIAD. What you see is all there is. It ignores missing facts to preserve a good story.
And acting as the counterweight, System 2 is your logical, analytical emergency brake. It is the only part of you capable of deep analysis, complex mathematics, and actively resisting your impulsive urges.
But it has a flaw.
It runs on a tiny, easily depleted physical battery. It consumes literal glucose to function, and it is inherently biologically lazy. It vastly prefers to let System 1 run the show to conserve energy.
The practical relevance of this architecture for you, the listener, cannot be overstated. If you want to build true, reliable, expert intuition in any area of your life, whether it's mastering AP physics, becoming a lethal debater, or leveling up your performance on the athletic field, you cannot rely on the illusion of cognitive ease.
No, you can't.
You can't just read the textbook once, feel like the words are familiar, and assume you have mastered the concept. You have to put in the grueling hours of deliberate practice and seek out harsh feedback so your System 1 can genuinely learn the valid patterns.
And crucially, when you find yourself taking a high-stakes exam or making a major life decision, you need to be acutely aware of the bat and ball traps hiding in plain sight.
Watch out for the 10-cent answer.
Exactly. You need to learn how to deliberately induce a little cognitive strain to wake up your lazy System 2. Question your first instinct. Double-check your intuitive, easy answers. Ask yourself the hard question. Did I just secretly substitute an easy, emotional question for the difficult, analytical one I was actually asked?
As we wrap up, we want to leave you with one final, provocative thread to pull on in your own life. We spent a lot of time talking about the parole judges and how ego depletion reduces highly trained professionals to their most impulsive, default, risk-averse selves just because they burn through their glucose battery.
It's a powerful lesson.
And we've talked extensively about how our physical environment primes our behavior completely beneath our conscious awareness, like a simple picture of staring eyes making people significantly more honest.
Taking all of that biological reality into account, we pose this final question to you. Take a hard look at your own daily schedule. What time of day are you currently making your most important, high-stakes decisions?
Because if you are trying to decide your future college plans, or if you are initiating a serious relationship-defining argument with a friend or a parent late at night after a grueling 8-hour day of school and sports practice, when your System 2 battery is flashing red, totally depleted of energy, are you truly the one making that choice?
It's a sobering thought.
Or is your lazy, exhausted brain just jumping to the first coherent conclusion it can find, taking the biological path of least resistance?
It is a question highly worth engaging your system to think about.
The next time you walk into that noisy, chaotic high school cafeteria and instantly sense the bitter tension at your friend's table, take a second to pause. Appreciate the incredible, lightning-fast associative machine in your head that just processed thousands of data points to read the room. But before you react, before you impulsively jump in and take a side based purely on a gut feeling, take a breath, wake up System 2, and ask yourself what vital information you might be missing.